Okay. Is that going? This is going.
You guys have been here before to the studio?
Yes.
Twice?
I've been here twice before.
Once before.
Yes.
Okay, 30 seconds. Let's see what I'm playing afterwards. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna put this in. Good afternoon and welcome to Folk and Acoustic Music. My name is Michael Stock here every Sunday on 91.3 WLRN in South Florida. I'll be playing some new music, some old music today. Opening up the program, though, was guitarist Mary Flower, a multi-instrumentalist, I should say. Her album is called Instrumental Breakdown, and that tune we heard was called Crooked from Mary Flower. Have one interview this afternoon, and in the studio right now, introduce you to Henry Kay and Wayne Armond. And Henry, welcome back to the studio.
Thank you, Michael. Lovely to be here, as always.
And Wayne, you as well.
Thank you very much, Mike.
If you know Wayne or Henry, you know that we're talking about reggae music this afternoon. And Henry, first of all, congratulations on another season of your podcast, Rootsland.
Thank you very much.
You were here when you started that podcast, and it's your history in reggae music.
Yes, my history living, working, spending time in Kingston, Jamaica, working in reggae, and my interactions with all the various characters and artists and musicians during that time.
It's an interesting story. So just tell me real quickly how you got involved in reggae music.
So basically, I was always a fan of reggae music. And
where are you from?
I'm from Long Island, New York.
Okay.
I went to school in Washington, D.C. at American University, and this was during the political turbulent time of the Iran-Contra hearings. And this was not unlike today. This is times where politicians are before committees interviewing people and grandstanding. Everybody's looking for their little sound bite. They want to get on CNN. Now it's they want to go viral. And I was just studying justice and getting into politics and kind of frustrated with what was going on, what I was seeing, wondering if I really wanted to spend my life doing that. And I was just wandering around D.C., driving around like I love to do late at night. Went to Tower Records. For your listeners, some of them will know what a record store is. Others will not, unfortunately. It's a place where you can find your own little identity. You just, peruse the sections. And I was in a world music or a reggae section, which is a music I loved. And on the back of the CD, it said produced by Dr. Dread, Ross Records, Washington, D.C. And I thought to myself, wow, there's a guy named Dr. Dread producing reggae records here in D.C. I got to be part of that. So I ended up getting an internship for him. And Dr. Dread, I was expecting, some Rasta in some, dark studio in downtown D.C. But it turned out Dr. Dread was a man named Gary Himmelfarb, who was, a white guy from the suburbs who started this amazing company. He was a real pioneer. It became one of the biggest distribution companies in America, independent. Not only reggae, but rock, independent rock. Dave Grohl, with his early band, was signed to this label. So I got a job, and that's how I entered in music, reggae. He, in turn, got me the opportunity to work for Bob Marley's widow in Kingston, Jamaica, following graduation. So I went down and decided this is what I want to do.
And you lived in Jamaica?
Yes, I spent on and off for about 2 decades plus, living and working in the studio, producing music.
And also with you here now is Wayne Armond. Wayne, you're Henry mentioned Rasta. Are you a Rasta man?
I am not by definition, but it's a good way to live. The Rasta philosophy is a good way to live. But what directly stopped me was because I did a lot of research. The late great Jacob Miller was encouraging me to put locks on your head.
Are you from Jamaica?
Yes, I'm from Jamaica.
Okay.
But in the 70s and 60s, if you wore locks, it wasn't a fashion statement, Mike. You had to be serious about Rastafarianism. And the thing that I could not find in my heart to believe was that the Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia was the God, was Jesus Christ manifest in this time. I find that a little bit difficult to so I did not profess to be a Rastafarian, but I must say that their beliefs and their style of living, and I like the peace and love Rasta as different from the blood and fire Rasta. There's a difference.
I don't know. I'm learning things, but your life has been reggae music
All the time.
Have you had bands?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and you knew Bob Marley.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I did.
Henry, were you always a writer?
Yes, I was. I started out as a songwriter, not a podcast writer, story writer. But I started out as a songwriter, but always loved keeping a diary and stuff like that. So.
I listened to your earlier podcast. You could still listen to the Rootsland podcast.
Yes, it's all continuation. So it's just now we're on season 8 this season.
Season 8.
Yes,
that's amazing. I enjoyed him so much. This season just started a few months ago.
Yeah. So basically, in October, my podcast was invited to go down to the celebration. The Peter Tosh Fest was the celebration of Peter Tosh's 80th birthday.
Oh, before I meant to ask this question before, but just to relate to this, is reggae folk music?
Reggae, I would say, is derived from Jamaican folk music. Mento and the early sounds of Jamaica slowly evolved from the 50s and 60s into reggae. The strongest connection I would put between reggae and folk music is, when he was talking about the Blood and Fire version of reggae and Rasta, is protest music. Remember, thank God for folk music, we had musicians and spokesmen were using this music to speak up for voiceless, union people who had no voice, the Pete Seegers, and then later on the Dylans and the Joan Baez's. And I think that Jamaican reggae music, the Bob Marleys and the Peter Toshes, mirror that. This is their version of what was happening on the streets in here in the village and on the West Coast, where this voice of the people was just stirring up. That's what reggae is. They're both connected. It's rebellion, standing up to the authority, and speaking for the voiceless. And I think that's how folk and reggae are really intimately connected.
Just on a side note, I always like to pay tribute to Clint O'Neill, who had the first reggae show in this country on this station.
Clint O'Neill, many nights, I always say it, and thank God for public radio, what he did for Jamaican artists and reggae music, just those nights and pumping it out there into the airwaves and WLRN. I mean, absolutely, he's missed, and it was a very valuable thing for everybody. I used to listen to it driving back from the studio late at night. His voice, that velvet voice.
And his laugh.
Yeah.
All right, so your 8th season is about Peter Tosh.
So interestingly enough, I'm going down to Jamaica in October for the Peter Tosh's 80th birthday, and we're driving from Kingston with a couple of artists I work with. It's about a 3-hour drive to the South Coast, Westmoreland, where Peter Tosh is from, the south west coast of Jamaica. Beautiful drive through the country. And we're talking about the unfortunate murder of Peter Tosh. The official narrative was it was a robbery gone wrong. People entered his house. He supposedly had money. He just came back from the U.S. They didn't find anything. It got very frustrating. Names were shot. Names were called, and Peter Tosh ends up getting a couple of bullets in his head. And that was always the official narrative. But being someone in the streets and spending a lot of time in the studios, there was always the urban legends, which is kind of this season is the subtitle, Herb, H-E-R-B. But the urban legend had always been that there was Peter Tosh betrayed a friend of his because his friend, he'd known his killer. And that years earlier, this gentleman named Lepo had done a prison stint for Peter Tosh, took a gun charge for him, under the condition that Peter would look out for his family because Peter was the money maker. He was an artist. They had gotten pulled over. And he got out of prison to find out that Peter did not look out, did not keep his end of the bargain. So this murder was retribution. And this is always underneath the official narrative. It was something that didn't seem implausible because Peter Tosh does have a reputation. This was someone who was defiant and belligerent and at sometimes angry. And no, it wasn't something that he was someone who went back on his word and someone who would, do something like that. But it just, I think in people's mind, they love salacious stories. They love that kind of thing. So they said they probably figured Peter Tosh wasn't there to defend himself. And it kind of makes sense. I could justify someone getting out of jail, finding out that his family's starving and then, seeing that he would kill someone. But we were talking about this the entire way, but as you start to dig a little deeper, things obviously start to fall apart.
Well, how did you know there was more to this story when you started this season?
Well, because there was always, underneath the urban legends, there were deeper urban legends that said that the killer wasn't alone. that he was accompanied by 2 other people that night, who I talk in this podcast as the unknown assailants.
I don't want to give anything away. Is this like a murder mystery?
It's a murder mystery. Yes, it's a murder mystery. But I can give you the outskirts of the information. But the point being, I'll just tell you the contradictions for now, and people can listen to the episodes and kind of put it all together, because I go through Supreme Court documents from an appeal, find some declassified CIA documents and from the U.S. Embassy. But what ends up happening is the things fall apart because, first of all, this man Lepo, he's not in jail for a gun charge. He's in jail for shooting a police officer. And we know that Peter Tosh wouldn't have been involved in anything like that and wouldn't have been able to walk away from anything like that. And amongst a bunch of a myriad of other charges.
That's a pretty drastic charge.
Yeah, yes.
And Peter Tosh was going to
No. This is part of he wasn't charged. This is why the story falls apart. The rumor was that this man was doing a gun charge for Peter Tosh. But it turns out this man wasn't doing a gun charge for anyone. He was in for shooting a police officer. And he was let out mysteriously a few years earlier than he was supposed to. And that night he wasn't alone. It turns out there was 2 other men who accompanied him. Supposedly, witnesses say dressed in suits with guns.
How is it you could find this information?
The information is generally out there, but we find this kind of conspiracy of silence like we often do with things that go on where you have state-controlled media and things that point in different directions. And as always with these stories, there's so much information and disinformation that comes out from every direction. No one knows what to believe.
How long ago was Peter Tosh?
September 11th, 1987.
Oh, so it's a while ago.
So it's almost 40 years ago. So there's 2 unknown men who accompanied him who are obviously involved in the shooting and are shooters, but they're kind of let go. They're never found guilty of anything. They kind of walk away. And it's not just Peter that shot that night. There's 7 people who were shot. He's there with some friends. 3 of them are killed, and ironically, all 7 of them are hit in the head with shots. So this is a lot more than just a robbery gone awry. There's ballistics and all kinds of things that point to a lot of different, directions. And the real crime, as I say, is not that Peter Tosh was killed, which is obviously as bad as, but his reputation kind of maligned afterwards. And I think the people behind it did a very good job of kind of hiding the real reason why this man was killed.
Well, and Peter Tosh, as far as reggae goes, he was like one of the stars, like Bob Marley.
Yes, he Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and Bunny Livingston were the original Wailers.
Oh, I see.
Yes, so he was the original Wailer, and yes, all those great songs, Get Up, Stand Up for Your Rights. He was part of the writing of, he was part of reggae history.
So did any of Peter Tosh's politics have to do with his death?
Well, apparently yes. So it's very interesting. Peter Tosh was a very outspoken critic of the government and the police. He was brutally beaten by the police several times, almost to the point of death one time. So he was very outspoken. He was as we know, an outspoken a proponent for the legalization of cannabis. His song "Legalize It" is absolutely, central to even people thinking about the idea of pot ever being legal or cannabis. He was way ahead of the game. He said that cannabis has healing medicinal purposes, and he was basically belittled and maligned and made to feel like he didn't know what he was talking about, and meanwhile he was really ahead of the game.
Bringing up marijuana, that was such an integral part of Rastafarian.
It's religion for part of their religion. Wayne can probably speak to a little bit, all being the Jamaican, but yes, they use it as a holy herb and ceremonial.
Yeah. So you've grown up with marijuana all around you your whole life.
Right.
Now, that's
smoking it at 14.
No. So was it illegal?
Of course, very illegal, man.
Very illegal, even though it's around you. It's common in Jamaica.
Yeah, but what is surprising to me. I went back to Jamaica in February of this year, and to see the guys on the street smoking their joints.
Oh, so now it's legal.
Well, up to a certain amount.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they used to, if they smell it on you, if the cops smell it on you, that was you're going to jail. But now you're allowed a certain amount.
So right there, it shows you the cops are not for reggae, because reggae was about Rastafarian. So right, and starting right there, there's a conflict.
Mike, the cops are just doing their job. It's a job. Trust me. I have never met an officer of the law who didn't love reggae music, or love Peter Tosh, but they have a job to do. And I mean, there was a time in Jamaica where where the government actually sent the commissioner of police to kill a settlement of Rastafarians. And that day is remembered in Jamaica every year.
No kidding. When did that happen?
That was in the 50s.
Really?
Yeah, in the 50s.
Wayne Armond is here along with Henry Kay. And Wayne, you brought your guitar. I want to get a couple songs out of you.
Sure.
What are you going to start with?
Well, I'd love to do a Peter Tosh song.
Okay. And
the song is, Peter, as Henry Kay told you, is a very rebellious spirit. He always talks. But there is a kinder, gentler side to him. And if we have time, I'll tell you a story about that.
Sure.
But this is a song that he did, and I think it's about the disenfranchised people who just wanting a better life. It's called Pick Myself Up. Sitting in the morning sun and watching all the birds passing by. Oh, I tried, but I got to pick myself up and dust myself off, and I start all over again.
Wayne Armond, live in the WLRN studio with the Peter Tosh song. I swear I've heard that song before. It's very familiar.
Yeah, you probably did.
Did you have a story you wanted to tell about?
About Peter.
About Peter?
Yes, well, after Peter, Bob and Bunny became the great wailers that they were, I had started a band in 1980 called Chalice. And it was good. We had some hits in Jamaica. We were doing great shows. We moved fast as a band, as a new band. In 1 year, we were doing the biggest festival in Jamaica, the Reggae Sunsplash Festival. And after year 2, we started to do some touring. However, we needed that big break, right? We couldn't get a record company. Whatever we did, we sent to Island Records that Chris Blackwell had, but he always turned it down. Long story, but about Peter now. The band was about 4 years old. And one morning, I just heard a knock on my window, and there was a guy that I knew from the neighborhood, and he said to me, "The bush doctor wants to see you." And that was Peter's name, the well-known name for him, the bush doctor, because he believed in all these herbs. And I said, I couldn't believe me. Peter Tosh, want to see me? Yes.
You were the bush doctor, or Peter?
No,
was?
Peter.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
he was known as the bush doctor. So when this guy told me the bush doctor needs to see you, I was very surprised, because why would he want to see me? So I put on some clothes and went up to his house with the guy. And I was told the first thing is, you cannot go into the house with cigarettes. So if you have any cigarettes, leave it in your car. Okay, I left my pack of cigarettes in the car. Then when we reached the front door, I was told that you have to take your shoes off. All right, took my shoes off. And we went through this front door in a big living room with lots of African artifacts and artwork and things. And then after about 15 minutes, Peter came down the steps in this white, long dashiki thing and rolling his spliff in his, and he said, "Come, walk with me outside." And I said, "All right." And we're outside, and he says to me, "I'm launching a new album soon." And he says, every time I tour, every time I go on tour, the promoters put a band to open for me that is saying devil worship, and they're not in my vibe, they're not in my sync, they're not in my psyche. And I can't hardly take the stage when that has just defiled the stage. And he says, I look around Jamaica, and your band is the band that I see that means something to the people. And I want to take you on tour with me to open all my shows. Well, Mike, you could have blown me over with a feather, I tell you. So he says, all right, let your manager talk to my manager and we'll organize the details. And then we started to talk about Africa. I had not yet been to Africa. And he was telling me how, and when I asked him what Africa was, he pointed to the hills in Jamaica and he said, it's that, but 1,000 times bigger. And we spoke about that. All right. Everything was set now to go on tour in August. His new record was called No Nuclear War. And everything was set. Tickets were bought. Everybody was rehearsing to go on this tour with Peter Tosh. Peter Tosh, guitarist, was a good friend of mine. He had another group that would perform in the hotels, a duo called Ozzy and Stevie. And I was just dating my present wife. And we went down to the North Coast before I went on this long tour with Peter Tosh. And I looked in, before it was internet, there was a pamphlet the hotels used to have that showed you all the entertainment for that week. And I saw where Ozzy and Stevie was performing at the Hilton Hotel. And I said to my girlfriend at the time, said, let's go, because these guys are very entertaining. Now, Stevie is Peter Tosh's guitarist. We went and we walked into the room, and I was only in time to hear Stevie say, ladies and gentlemen, could we have a minute of silence for the death of Peter Tosh? And Mike, I cannot tell you, I heard one song. I was like a block of ice. And I sat down there and waited for them to finish the show and went up to their dressing room, and Peter said, 10 minutes before he took the stage, his wife called him and told him they had just killed Peter. But the thing about the story is that when we started, we asked all our friends in our age group, Third World, that had gotten a good start on Island Records, hey, can you line us up to get us out on tour? And nobody would pay us any mind. But Peter was big enough to use a Jamaican band to come and open all his shows. And that would always endear him to me, always.
That's beautiful. Well, when you come to think of it, Chalice has a lot of religious reference to begin with.
There you go.
And that's funny because I know growing up, reggae wasn't thought to be God's music. They thought that was devil's music as well because of the marijuana influence.
Well, reggae is wide, and it depends on who is the purveyor and who, because ska music, right? Ska music, which was really our first pop music. The singers used to have messages in there. There was message in ska music. But when it came to rocksteady now, when the music slowed down, it was all about love, having fun on the beach. It was happy-go-lucky girl. It was, I'm going to wear you to the ball. It was rocksteady was all about that. 60s. Then come the 70s, and political vibes get turbulent. And when the political vibes get, because in the ska days, Bob Marley used to sing about simmer down, control your temper, simmer down, the battle is getting hotter.
Simmer down.
Simmer down. And then you had guys talking about rude boys gone to jail and all that, right? The ska era. When the reggae time came around now, the messages came back because the political climate changed. Everything was rough. There was the gangs. There was one party versus the next party. It was tense, very tense. And that's when the songs became militant. And to show you how politics rule the whole culture of your country, when Michael Manley was voted out in the 1980s, and Eddie Seaga became the prime minister, Bob Marley died in 1981, right? A hero, a legend. You know who became the next big superstar after Bob Marley?
No.
When Seaga came back to power and the supermarkets were full of American apples and grapes and stuff that we didn't produce, the next hero was an albino called Yellow Man. And he brought back that whole fun thing.
Yeah.
I'm getting married in the morning.
Yeah.
And, and it was fun and laughter, and people started to have a few dollars in their pocket again. And the whole climate changed again.
Wayne Armond is here in the studio along with Henry Kay. Listening to your podcast, Henry, you go over the evolution of reggae music and how it started off not innocent but positive, and then it became
It's splintered. It's splintered. First of all, I do credit that job where I took with Mrs. Marley at Tough Gong in Kingston. It turned out the person who mentored me and I was working with was a singer named Bob Andy, his name's Keith Anderson, and he was also at that time hired to be creative director of Tough Gong Music, which was the Marley company, trying to make it into more than just Marley's label. They wanted to make this well-rounded, independent record label on their own. So he's someone who comes from these early areas of ska, like Wayne's talking about, rocksteady, the early. So he made sure to really educate me, not only to the history of the music, but really to take me to the places where the music was made and where he grew up. And just he figured if I was going to be tackling this music as a career, then I really needed to know where it came from and what it was about. So yes, I go through that because in telling my story and recounting people like Bob Andy and Deadly Headley, who's another character, early a ska musician from the famed Alpha Boys School, which was where reggae kind of came out of this children's home in Kingston of orphans that had this amazing music program. I tell that story. It's like an amazing story. Sister Mary, this incredible DJ spinning woman nun, started this music program that, developed an amazing array of musical talent for kids who had no parents and were destitute. One of them was the first black conductor of the I think it's the London Philharmonic, one of her students.
From Jamaica.
Yeah, from Jamaica. These were kids that went out into the world and created ska and music and all this amazing stuff. So, yeah, I get into the whole history of it because my story kind of interacts with so many people who were part of that history. Have
you got much response about your current season, about Peter Tosh?
Yeah, it's actually been a pretty exciting season because in podcasts, true crime genre is very hot. Mm. So I've brought in a lot of fans. I was featured on last week's Grateful Dead podcast, the good old Grateful Dead cast, which is a very popular podcast. And they were talking about the 80s, and it just so happens the stories intertwined. So it's been getting a lot of excitement because people, they all know the story about Peter Tosh. They've heard little things about the murder, but when they dig it deeper into it, it turns out it's a kind of enthralling story and disappointing and upsetting also when you kind of see where it circles back around.
The podcast is called Rootsland.
Correct.
What a great name. I'm surprised you were able to get that name. Rootsland podcast, and you just look it up and it comes up, right?
It just comes up in every format platform, from YouTube right on to Spotify and Apple and all that.
And are there any, beforehand we were talking about the correlation between current politics.
Yes.
And have you brought that up in your podcast as well?
Yes, it's very interesting stuff because as I was saying, so, what Wayne was just talking about, this political turmoil of the 70s, when the reggae music started becoming really conscious, when Rasta philosophy and reggae started coming in, this was just as Bob Marley and these artists and Peter Tosh and Bunny Wailer are developing. It coincides with the CIA getting involved in Jamaican politics. The leader he was talking about, Michael Manley, he wanted to reject, the capitalist coming in and take bauxite is a main ore that is in the Jamaican soil and is very valuable. And of course, the American mineral companies want to come in, and the foreign mineral companies. And since Michael Manley was more of the progressive leader, he wanted Jamaica to hold on to their rights. He didn't want them to necessarily give in to the IMF and become part of. He wanted them to become independent, and the CIA didn't like that, because he was leaning towards Castro and what Cuba was doing with socialism, and they were really scared about that. So, I talk about it in the podcast. So, the CIA, there was a secret plan that it went public. Kissinger was in charge, and I think forget who maybe Tennant. I forget who the CIA director at the time is, but they put $10 million into destabilizing the Jamaican country. the economy. It was economic turmoil. They sent in thousands of M16 guns onto the street to promote violence, to kind of just they wanted the Jamaican people to turn on Manley.
You're blaming the American CIA on this?
Well, they had backed the party. You know, they had backed the opposition leader, Edward Seaga. It was well known. There's documents and all that. So they had backed Seaga because they wanted Manley out of power. Did not want Jamaica going communist or socialist, and they were going to do anything to stop it. So they spent a fortune, millions of dollars. As I said, in that 1980 election, 800 people were killed during that election that Seaga finally won, because of the fact that things were so bad economically and violently in Jamaica. People couldn't take it anymore. Little did they know that this was all an orchestrated plot. And again, we talk about what's going on in the world today. Does it sound familiar? We want to have governments sign over mineral rights to us.
Yeah,
and then in order so they can keep their autonomy, or as long as they can keep their security.
Well, I hope we don't disrupt overthrow their government and dismantle their sovereignty. But that's fascinating because you don't know this history. You discovered this when in your research for this podcast?
Just digging deeper and deeper. It's amazing, really, what's out there. Like I said, there's very interesting stuff from some of the ambassadors of Jamaica. You know, that the violence that goes on, and even admitting he comes into office and he's saying the first thing that he does is when he's the U.S. ambassador, he gets a call from the opposition leader, Edward Seaga, who comes to him and says, hey, I guess we're going to have the same arrangement we had with the last ambassador, where you kind of give me all the information that's going on behind the scenes with the current government and kind of consult me if you want any moves. And the ambassador says, no, that's not how it works. That's not how it works here. You know, my job is to be, you know, neutral. And if your government wants you to hear anything, you'll hear from them, but not from me.
Mike,
Yes.
I lived through it. And in Ronald Reagan told Seaga to burn out every marijuana field in Jamaica. And in the meantime, up in California, up in Humboldt County, they were growing thousands of acres of marijuana. And he wanted to burn out Jamaica. And the songs changed.
Yeah.
John Holt say, if you continue to burn out the weed, we're going to burn down the cane crops. It was not pretty in the 70s.
That is crazy. That's crazy. And it's Henry's podcast. We're learning about that. But about your podcast, it's always been about reggae music, and now you kind of veered off. Do you mind that?
Well, remember, it's Peter Tosh is a founder of reggae, so it's like, you know, I explain it. Sometimes the podcast is like jazz. It's improv. You're doing a subject. I go down to cover a festival, and the next thing I'm digging into a murder. You know, so you never know where the story is gonna go, and it's always it goes in an interesting direction. That keep thinking I'm gonna run out of material, but then there's always another season that pops up. I love the true crime thing, and I may stick with it. You know, I have a friend who lost a son in a very violent way, and maybe it's a very personal story, but maybe get into that crime up the road.
What is the state of reggae today?
Well, the state of reggae, in my opinion, I don't think Jamaican roots reggae is in a very good state. Because what I would say is reggae has become a very big umbrella now. Because you have reggaeton out of, the Latin market. And
that's more of a dance music.
That's more of a dance. This all stems from dancehall music, which was the split also in the 70s when Wayne was talking about Yellow Man, when he started more of the party, feel-good. That in the 80s. That's all of a sudden when the reggae had like the schism where you had the roots, the Rasta, the Marley Tosh, branch, and then you had the dancehall, which is more the computer-generated party, feel-good music. Dancehall went and created a lot of musics within its genre. You had reggaeton that came out of dancehall. You had Afrobeat that came out of dancehall. You had even dance music and EDM that kind of came out of that.
So you don't have any one person who you could say represents it or is the best-selling reggae artist?
No, I would say that what has happened now. So one of the biggest genre right now within reggae here in the States is what they call Cali Roots, which has become the quote-unquote American modern reggae version of Jamaican music. And I'm not saying it's necessarily done out of disrespect or appropriation, but it's definitely 3 generations or 2 generations removed for authentic reggae. So you can't say it has that real roots authentic.
Cali meaning California?
Cali roots. And you have bands that are touring the country, selling out. I mean, they're very, very popular right now. And again, it's maybe good for reggae because it's opening doors. People will hear this, light, reggae light, and then say, oh, maybe I'll listen to Chalice or Marley or something a little deeper. But I think that Jamaican, what I call in my podcast, the Jamaican musical industrial complex, they dropped the ball. They have how many countries, especially little countries like Jamaica in the world, that you can say created these musical genres that have gone so international, like reggae or like dancehall too, or like ska, or like rocksteady. All these genres within reggae itself have their own, huge followings.
It's strange how Jamaica is the center of all that, and it became a worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah, and you can't go to one. Right now, there's festivals in the summer lining up from Germany to Spain, reggae festivals that will sell out hundreds of thousands of German kids or Spanish kids or French kids going, and maybe 15-20% of the artists on that festival are Jamaican. The rest are representative of their own country or American. Or the problem was that when dancehall and computer rhythms and everything took over in Jamaica, it became cheap and accessible. And a country where music comes from the ghetto and the urban communities, it's very hard to learn music and scales and practice musicianship and buy instruments and go to rehearsals. It's easy to listen on a beat on a drum machine and come up with some lyrics. So economics of it, and the social aspects, it lent towards Jamaicans moving towards dancehall. And then it was roots reggae was neglected. You didn't have a whole young people wanting to start playing this kind of stuff. They saw what was happening with dancehall. It was successful. It was commercial. Shabba Ranks, Maxi Priest, Shaggy, who's a big artist. You've heard that name. People, it's a quick, easy.
I know a lot of Shaggies.
Yeah, Shaggy's huge.
Yeah.
So that's what the kids were seeing. They were no longer seeing the Peter Toshes or the Bob Marleys. They were fading away. So, I think that what happened was that reggae it started planting seeds in other parts of the world, and where people like a band in California, they can get in a van and they can start in, Oregon, work their way down to the coast of California, play 30 clubs. They can sleep in the van. They could stay in little motels. You can't get reggae bands from Jamaica to do that. It's too expensive. It's too time consuming. Yeah. So what happened is like all these little clubs where they used to bring on reggae bands from Jamaica and used to import it. Now it's find it easier to use local stuff, and like everything else, economics. So Jamaica's music has hurt.
I could see how you have a lot of material to continue your podcast here. Henry Kay's podcast is Rootsland.
Correct.
Rootsland.
Yep, Rootsland.
Rootsland, one word, and start from the beginning because it's a great story. And Wayne, how about one more song?
Okay. The next song I like to do is because Peter Tosh was such an advocate for the legalization of marijuana. And unfortunately, he passed before that law came to pass.
He knew he was going to get in trouble singing that song.
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean,
it was banned in Jamaica.
He was banned in Jamaica.
Legalize it, the song was
banned.
One
of his biggest songs was called Legalize It, and that was banned in Jamaica. And so I wrote this song now. I wrote this song called Kush because marijuana has many names, right? So in this song, I refer to it as Kush, and I refer to a marijuana cigarette as a spliff. That's what we know it as, a spliff. So it's kind of humorous, but especially the second verse. When the war was over and the brethrens call a feast, they all sit down in a circle and blaze the chalice of peace. We no longer have the liquid in a bush, no more felony charge or misdemeanor, just because we have a stick of sensimilia. No way.
Wayne Armond, live in the WLRN studio. That's great. I like that song. Have you recorded that?
Yes, just did.
So you just recorded, so it's a new song?
Yes, it's pretty new.
Oh, great. Wayne Armond here in the studio with Henry Kay. Thank you both so much, and continued luck with Rootsland.
Thank you so much, Michael,
Thank
as
you,
always.
Okay, thank
Appreciate
you.
the support.
Always a pleasure being here.
Here's a version of Sail Away Ladies by Marley's Ghost.